In this video, we're going to talk to you about a couple different techniques for conflict management and how to implement these conflict management tools in youth work. So we have two different methods. Louis and Anna are going to talk about forum theater, and my name is Tali. I'm going to talk about the Betzavta method. We have just completed a week-long training where we had 24 participants from 12 different countries coming together organized by UB, an organization in the Netherlands. We implemented these different conflict management techniques.
We will talk now about forum theater, that is part of a concept that is the theater of the oppressed, a concept developed by Augusto Boal in the late 60s, beginning of 70s in Brazil. This drama director wanted to take further theater and the possibility of using theater to work within a community, and especially focusing on the relationship between the oppressor and the oppressed. So it mainly acts on a relation of oppression. It also, interesting point about forum theater is the perspective of the spectator, which basically means that the audience will be observing the performance of a specific situation, but it will also be able to interfere in this performance by giving its own perspective of the situation. This method is based on real-life situations. So there is always a connection between the performance and the conflict situation between the relation of the oppressor and the oppressed. It aims to empower people to find their own ways of changing the oppression situation towards a more equal relation in society.
Because forum theater is based on real-life stories, the first thing the participants need to do is share real stories that they know or they experience themselves, that there was some kind of oppression. After they share their stories, the participants select one that they find most interesting to work with. Later on, they start creating this short performance that is going to be performed and show to the spectators what is the situation exactly that they want to work on.
After the creation of the performance, then participants present the performance to spectators. When the situation is in the critical point, then the action stops. And actually, there is a facilitator that is called the Joker that will start to ask questions to the spectators. Things like, what was the situation? Who were the people involved? At this point, the spectators, they can come in with their own perspective of the situation, analyzing it, understanding it, and then in a certain point, the Joker will start directing the questions for possible solutions of the situation. Here, the spectator and these new ideas that come to the performance, they can actually be acted. So the spectator has a chance to go in and to repeat the same situation from now a different perspective or point of view. And this is very powerful because this way the spectator has a chance first to step in the other people's shoes and to understand more deeply with some feelings towards the people that were involved in the situation. And also they have more possibilities on how they can act in real life situations such as this.
For me, the forum theater is a very interactive way of involving people into what means a conflict and in putting their energy on it, so in finding out the best solution. It is a good method because it involves the people who did experience conflict, but it also let the others to observe and get into the activity when they feel they have to change something or they can change something. So I think it's a very good method.
Betzavta is a method developed in Israel in the Adam Institute and adopted in Germany. And the method uses the dynamics of the group to look at how democracy works as a system, but also uses the language of democracy for people to be able to reflect on themselves. So by linking these two things, how democracy and conflict work as theories, as well as in practice within the group, we use these components in order to get people to reflect on how they behaved in a process, and maybe sometimes these dilemmas that come up, like the difference between what they think of themselves or what they say that they want, equality, freedom, inclusion, versus how they actually behave in a group. And to look at this difference gives you the opportunity to see a little bit deeper inside yourself, and to raise some dilemmas inside yourself rather than kind of putting this out on the world as a fault or a problem on the outside, but you look at yourself and the dilemmas that come up in you, so that you can better understand the dilemmas that come up in another. And in this way, you can understand conflict on a deeper and more kind of basic level. The reflection, divided into result and process, gives participants a chance to look at where they were in the process, how I participated in an activity. So rather than looking at just a political process, we bring ourselves back into the process. And the tool is really the practice of self-reflection. For example, an activity in Betzavta has participants write down their names on a card, and the instruction is that whoever gets the most cards can make a rule that is valid for the group. I give them 15 minutes, and they engage in a process. So it's up to them to decide what they want to do. Some participants steal cards, some participants negotiate, some want to talk about what the rule will be, some want to talk about what the needs of the group are, why we even need a rule. So we engage in this process for 15 minutes. And then afterwards, we reflect on this process by looking at some of the more hidden dynamics that have happened. Let's say I want, and maybe bringing up some of these dilemmas that happen in this process. So for example, I want equality for the group, but I also want to speak whenever I want. So I take my freedom where I want. Or I want to be a leader, but I also in a way want order and want to be told what to do. So looking at some of these dilemmas allows you to see yourself a little bit better, because you see that in one situation you could be the person wanting the freedom and the authority, and in another situation you could be the person wanting to follow. Another exercise that we did involved strings, and participants had to write down on a Post-it note what they would like to do during a 30-minute break. And they then tied themselves together with different pieces of string. And I said, you now have a 30-minute break. And in this process, they negotiate their individual needs, so what I want to do during the break, but they're now tied to a group. And the idea is to look at what happens when we have to put our individual needs with the group's needs. So let's say I put on my note that I want to be alone. Do I cut myself from the group? Or how do I negotiate these two freedoms? Individual freedom with, let's say, wanting to belong and to be inside a group. Another activity that we did had participants divide into two teams, and one team was tasked with putting all the chairs in a circle, the biggest possible circle, and the other team was tasked with putting all the chairs, building the highest possible tower. So then they come together and they see how they work together. Do they continue in their teams? In this case, for this group, they decided that they wanted to work together. So they kind of passed this. They made let's say, a progress into wanting to work together. But with this progress came also new challenges because not everybody was heard. And then in the reflection afterwards, we were able to see and reflect on even when we want to, when we progress in a process. So we feel like this is nicer than previous activities because we do it together. There are still challenges to face, such as participants not being heard, a chaotic process, not enough equality, let's say, for how everybody wants to participate. So again, we reflect on the process, the result of the activity, and the process of the activities, so people can really reflect on themselves and not say this is somebody else's fault or this is something outside of myself, but to look within themselves so as to get to know themselves better and maybe find a little bit of how to bring together their freedom within the workings of a group. So it's like using the language of democracy and conflict in order to look within. In the Betzavta method, it's important to really give people the space to reflect and to allow judgment to come up when it comes up, because we all have judgment and we all judge negatively and positively. And to allow emotions to come up too, because in some of these processes we think we need to be very rational or logical, but just to allow these things to come and then to be able to look at them together as a group. And when we can look at conflict in this way, we can also see it a little bit better, because things are kind of given a space. So if somebody's emotional, somebody could be emotional about something, somebody could be more from a rational perspective, just to let everything come up and to recognize it as it comes up.
Betzavta is a very good method because it forces you to reflect more on what you think is right to do and what the other think is right to do. So it's really interesting to find out others' opinion and to see that somehow you have to compromise to get to an agreement.
Awesome.